I don't remember. I never remember what I said. Anyway, I stand by it. Conas, how are ye? Welcome back to the Candlelit Tales YouTube channel and another video where we're going to be explaining an aspect of Irish mythology. This time we're going to talk about the god of war, who's actually a goddess. The Morrigan, one of the taoi de Danann. And we have a whole other video about who the taoi de Danann and the Irish gods were. We kind of got into why there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty about them and why there's a lot of stuff that we don't really know. There's a lot of gaps in this. I'm not going to get back into that again because I'd be here all day. But the ones that did survive, the ones that we still talk about today, are the ones whose stories survived. And the Morrigan is the one whose story survived. She's one of the ones who is extremely present in the mythology. Now, some people will also make a case that there's a god called Neat, whose name I'm not sure how to pronounce, who gave the Dagda a fort and was married to Bav, and that he's kind of supposed to be an Irish war god. Honestly, I've never heard of him. I found out a little bit about him when I was researching for this video. And apparently some people kind of consider him to be a god. But if he is, there are no real stories about him or why he would be. So I'm going based off the stories because I'm a storyteller. And in my view, the Morrigan is the god of war. But that's not as simple a statement as it sounds. You see, the first thing when we're talking about the Morrigan that we have to kind of define and get our heads around is whether this is one goddess or three goddesses, because she's known as a triple goddess, and that leaves things a little bit open-ended. In some stories she seems to be three different characters entirely. So you have Bav, the battle crow, who is this goddess who transforms into a raven or a crow, flies over battlefields, and before the first battle of Moytura she rained fire on the Firbolg, the enemies of the taoi de Danann. She rained fire on them for one day and she rained blood on them for another day. And on the third day she shrieked and screamed so that they couldn't get any sleep for the next 3 days and nights in the run up to the battle, which is kind of why you want her on your side when you're going into a battle, because she has this effect of just demoralizing the opposing side. Or another character who's considered an aspect of the Morrigan is a character called Mechi, who comes up in the Ulster cycle. Now, Mechi is quite un-Morrigan-like at first. She marries a very ordinary mortal man. She seems to be very content to live as his wife and keep house and raise his children until the day that the King of Ulster makes her run a race. It's a whole story. It's definitely one we've told before. And when that causes her to have a miscarriage and lose the twins that she's pregnant with, that's when she puts a curse on the warriors of Ulster. And that's when the Morrigan side of her kind of comes out. There are a few different names given to the third personality, if there is a third in that trio. Some people say Anand, some people say Morrigu. There's a couple of other ones. There aren't any particular stories about those characters though, so again, I'm not really sure. So the question really is whether these are different personalities who all kind of come together to make a tripartite, triumvirate, Morrigu sort of committee personality, or whether this is one a singular character who can take on different aspects. Again, not really a solid answer to that one. Usually when I talk about her, I tend to refer to her as the latter, as a goddess who's very powerful, who's able to shapeshift and who can take on different aspects and different forms. Because I just think that's a little bit easier to get your head around. That doesn't mean it's right. It just means it's kind of tidier for storytelling purposes. She's one of those gods that gets the definite article in front of her name. I think the Dagda is the only other one who does. Depending on how you spell her name, either it has a fada, an elongating accent over the O, and she's Morrigan, or it doesn't, and she's Morrigan. It either translates as Mor means big, so it would be the Great Queen, or Morrigan means the shadow queen, the phantom queen. Different people have different ideas about that. I certainly am not going to get into a fight with anybody about whether a fada matters or not, because we're talking about a very, very old storytelling tradition. And I think they're both cool, frankly. So whether she's a singular character or many characters in one, whether she's the Great Queen or the Shadow Queen, what is her deal? What is her story? Well, she is a goddess of war. She's associated with war. She's also associated with battle rage. And I think a lot of the time in the stories, she's really more about the emotional manipulation than she is about the actual fighting. Although she does fight in some of the battles. She's someone who inspires terror in her enemies and inspires rage in her allies. Not, a nice emotion, often considered a negative emotion, but this battle rage is something that comes up with a lot of characters in Irish mythology, most famously with Cuchulainn, who has a sort of a magical transformation that goes along with it. But there are many others who have this battle rage. It's kind of considered to be a gift of the Morrigan. Like a lot of gifts from the other world, it is a double-edged sword, because the battle rage makes people not notice their wounds, not notice that they're being injured, incredibly berserk. It's the idea of the sort of berserker, or like the D&D barbarian who's overcome with rage and doesn't shrugs off blows, doesn't notice it, hits incredibly hard. The extra difficulty that you get with that in Irish mythology is that people don't recognize friends from foe. So when the rage clears and you come back to your senses, you might find out that you have done incredible damage to your own allies and you've hurt people that you didn't mean to hurt, which is kind of what giving into a fit of rage is like, frankly. So you might think in the stories she would be a sort of a general to the Tuatha Dé Danann, or she would be the person directing their troops. Interestingly enough, that is not the case. In fact, in the Second Battle of Moytura, the Dagda has to explicitly go and get her and ask her to help them, because they know that having her on side is decisive as to whether or not they'll win a battle. But they also know that, she is fickle. She doesn't really seem to be terribly concerned about who wins. She's more concerned that there will be a fight. And that makes sense then that a lot of her symbology is tied to crows and ravens, because these are carrion birds and they turned up on battlefields. Sometimes they would turn up on battlefields before a battle, which must have been, frankly, kind of creepy. As Bav, this is one of her forms. One of the ways that she can kind of be of help is by taking on her battle crow form and putting the fear of God or the fear of goddesses into her enemies. So the Dagda managed to get her on side by having sex with her, because that's kind of in character for both of them. And then in later myths, like the Ulster cycle, she appears in dreams and prophecies. And she really just eggs people on to fight each other a lot of the time. There's a great story in the Ulster cycle that I think really shows her, her MO, the way that she is with people. It's called The Wedding of Manya Morgor. So Maeve is the Queen of Connacht, Crahurb is the King of Ulster. They hated each other and were bitter, bitter enemies. One of Maeve's sons had to go to Ulster to get married. So he set off in his retinue, and the main move was that he was kind of hoping that he would be able to get in and out with his bride before the King of Ulster found out that he was there. So naturally, the Morrigan appeared to the King of Ulster in a dream and said, hey, your enemy's son is in your province. And if you get up now and go, you can catch him and you can murder him. So Crahur gets up. The King of Ulster assembles his troops, such as they are. They're not prepared for war at the time, and goes down and murders Maeve's son Manya. The next night, the Morrigan appears in Queen Maeve of Connacht's dream to say, hey, your son who went to Ulster is dead now. Your bastard ex-husband, the King of Ulster, murdered him. And if you go right now, you can catch him and get revenge. And then she kind of sits back and watches. And of course, Maeve goes to Ulster, almost kills Crahur. That's kind of the whole story. But I think it really shows the kind of character of the Morrigan. She's not pro-Ulster, she's not pro-Connacht, she's pro-death and destruction and rage and slaughter and salting the wound. And that also really illustrates another side of her, which is like this skill she has at prophecy. Like she can see into the future, she can tell what's going to happen. So she can tell Maeve, like, your son is alive, but you'll be too late. By the time you get there, he will be dead. She also, as one of her aspects, sometimes this is Bav's aspect, but I'm actually not sure where I got that from. I don't remember. But sometimes she can take on the appearance of a character called the Washer at the Ford, who comes up in the Cuchulainn story as he's going to his final battle, and also in the Fianna cycle. She appears to Fionn McCool's grandson Oscar on his way to the Battle of Gowra. And the Washer at the Ford is one of those just deeply creepy things that crop up in Celtic mythology from time to time. A warrior on the way to a battle is about to cross a ford, which is a shallow place in the river where you can get your horses across, and sees a woman doing laundry, but she's washing a copious amount of blood out of the clothes that she's washing. And on closer inspection, the warrior recognizes that she is washing their clothes that they are wearing right now. And as soon as they make that connection, she looks up, makes eye contact and says, I am washing the clothing of your name, you who go to die in battle today. And then, because you can't get around prophecies in Irish myth, that warrior just has to carry on and go on to the battle. And usually in the stories, it's kind of a sign of the courage of the warrior. Like Oscar laughs at her and says, do you think that's scary to me? I'm not afraid of dying. I'm the greatest warrior that ever lived. Cuchulainn just kind of takes it because he's had a load of prophecies that day already and kind of already knows that he's going to his death, but that clinches it. So she can see the future and she can also kind of steer the future. Now, there's not much in the way of family ties that the Morrigan has. Some versions will have it that she is the sister of Banba, Fola and Eru, who are the goddesses that the island of Ireland are named after. In the Ulster cycle, the warrior woman Scahach is sometimes referred to as being like a daughter of the Morrigan, but it's not entirely clear that that's not like poetic. Like that seems to be not supposed to be taken literally, just a kind of an ode to her skill and her strength as a warrior. She only had one child that she definitely cared about, and that is a tragic story because the child was named Mechi, and he did not live for a long time. Mechi was sickly, he was small, he was a little bit frail and a little bit weak, and so the Morrigan called on Dian Cecht, the healer of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and he examined the child and he found out that not only was this a child who had a heart defect, this was a child who was going to destroy the world if he wasn't euthanized promptly, because he had 3 hearts, Mechi, and inside each heart was a tiny serpent, and they were growing. And Dian Cecht understood that as the child grew, his hearts would grow and the serpents would grow. And when he grew up and when he got to his full maturity, the serpents would burst out of his chest, killing him, and then they would destroy the world. Naturally, the Morrigan, goddess of death and destruction and battle and rage, had absolutely no interest in saving the world by killing her child, so she refused to do anything about it. She had to be lured away from her home, and the 3 kings of the Tuatha Dé Danann, McCool, MacEcht and Magrania, who were married to her 3 sisters, Banba, Fola and Eru, they first hunted the child and had him torn apart by hounds, then burned his body, and then scattered the ashes in the river, which was a triple death, which comes up a couple of times in Irish mythology and might, maybe, be something like ritualistic or suggestive of ritual, where he's dismembered and then burned and then like symbolically drowned. So nothing can survive of the child, nothing can survive of the serpents. Now, I don't think that's necessarily Why the Morrigan is the way she is. She was already a goddess of battle rage and war, but it certainly didn't do anything to mellow her out. There are a couple of places in Ireland that are really strongly linked with the Morrigan. The main one is the Cave of Cats in Connacht, which is also called Wainigat, where she's supposed to kind of like live, which is also very heavily associated with Samhain and the 1st of November, which is now Halloween. And if anyone knows any other places that are particularly associated with the Morrigan, comment below. So symbolically, I mentioned she's linked with ravens, with crows. She's also sometimes linked with the hooded crow or the skulled crow, which is a kind of a grey and black corvid. They're all carrion birds. She's very pro-corvid, as are we all. Obviously, the symbology is pretty clear there, that they gathered at the battlefields before battles to feast on the dead and the dying, and were just generally considered birds of ill omen and birds of bad luck. But the great gift of the Morrigan does seem to have been rage, anger, fury. And there are some characters in Irish mythology that really took that on and took that in. So let us know, have you heard of the Morrigan before this? Did you learn anything new in this video? Is there anything that you would like to correct us on? Or is there anything you'd like to suggest that we cover in this series? And we will see you in the next one. So long before.